This is Remembering Survival Inside a Nazi Slave Labor Camp by Christopher R. Browning. Chapter 19, Children in the Camps. Narrated to you by me, Carter Banks. Though only Jewish workers capable of factory labor, vital to the German war effort, were supposed to be interned in the Strachowitz camps and rented from the SS as slaves, in fact, many children 12 years old and younger lived in the camps through a combination of German laxity, favoritism, and corruption on the one hand, and Jewish ingenuity and solidarity on the other. By one estimate, as many as 50 children who were not yet teenagers entered the Strachowitz camps at various times. The post-war testimonies of 16 such children who managed to survive not only Strelnica, Mazowka, and Tartak, but also the ordeal of subsequent camps and relocations illuminate a highly unusual aspect of life in the Strachowitz factory slave labor camps. Forgot about that fan. Though some of these testimonies are composed of quite fragmentary memories of particularly vivid moments, others provide surprisingly coherent and sustained narratives. Children came into camps in a number of ways. First, there were the children whose presence was permitted by the Germans as a calculated concession to the privileged prisoners. Second, there were children who successfully falsified their age in procuring work permits, who were selected on the Wiersbennik marketplace for labor despite their age, or who evaded deportation and sneaked into camp following the liquidation of the ghetto. Third, there were children who survived in hiding with Gentile families during the deadly Althoff era, and who subsequently smuggled into camp when conditions inside the Strachowitz camps seemed safer than growing risk of continued hiding on the outside. Fourth, there were a few children among the new contingents of Jews transferred into Strachowitz from Bodzenschau, Wolanau, Tomaszów Mazowiecki, and Mokozin, and Radom in 1943. Concerning the children of privileged Jews, Shlomo Einesman brought into camp one son, Noah, and two daughters, Rosia and Lee. Rachel Wolfowitz had in camp his two children, 7 and 9. Moshe Barinzwig was alleged to have had his children in camp, as well as his lover's son. Among Jews in the Konsum, shoemaker Pinchas Heldstein, by his own account, had initially hidden his wife and children on the morning of the deportation. By other accounts, his one son and two daughters were in the camp, so they may have joined him at some point after the deportation. Of the children of privileged Jews in the camps, two gave post-war testimonies. One was Yankiel Feldpeiser, son of the head of the tailoring section in Konsum, Meyer Feldpeiser. Born in December 1930, Yankiel was still only 11 years old when he entered the camp. He slept in the same family quarters with his parents, though not with an older brother who worked in one of the factories, and stayed with his parents in the tailoring section of the Konsum during the day. He was free to run around unless there were Germans in camp, at which point he hid out of sight under the cutting table in the tailoring section. The other surviving child of the privileged was Einesman's daughter Rosia, born in 1933. She remembers that in Strelnica, her father and others were subjected to a mock execution in front of their families a very plausible memory given Althoff's predilection for staging theatrical amusements. She also remembers the family waiting at the camp gate for the return of her father, who had been sent for 1 day of hard labor at the blast furnace as his punishment. After moving from Strelnica to Majauka, the Einesman and Wolfowitz families each had a separate cabin, so she did not live in the family's barracks with other privileged Jews and their children. In her private cabin, she was exempt from selections, so she does not remember having to hide, nor does she remember associating with the other children in the camp. She was uncomfortably aware of her privileged status, kept to herself, and had no life in camp. 3 12-year-olds had a precarious legal status in camp. Eva Zukir's father had paid the required bribe for her work permit. Eva, born in March 1930, was on her way to her first day of work on the morning of October 27, 1942, when she was turned back and sent to the marketplace. Despite her age, her work permit was honored. She was working with her mother in the kitchen on the night shift in Strelnica when Althoff made one of his notorious night visits there and shot a young man from Apatow. Eva remembered having to clean the blood off the potatoes. She and her mother survived the run for the Bugaj Forest selection in March 1943, though she was still weak from typhus. However, the following November, when she and her mother filed past Kolditz during the Ferlage selection, they were both sent to the trucks. A Jewish policeman vouched to Kolditz that she was 16 years old, and she, though not her mother, was spared. Thereafter, she did strenuous labor unloading sand, in which shell casings hot out of the furnace were cooled. Herz Unger, born in July 1930, was selected for labor on the marketplace, along with his father and older brother. When questioned about his age, he claimed to be 18. David Mongarden, born in March 1930, was selected for labor along with the rest of his family, but he does not mention whether or not he had a work permit. His father and one brother were kept for the cleanup commando, but never arrived in the camp. His sisters were in Majauka, but one managed to get into Strelnica and nurse him when he was stricken with typhus. He survived selection at the height of his illness when other prisoners tied him to the chimney on the barracks roof, and his mother subsequently bribed a Ukrainian guard to procure medicine for him. He survived the Ferlige selection when the Germans were specifically searching for 13 and 14-year-olds, as well as women over 40, by hiding in the factory and not returning to camp with his shift. Meshulek Baranek, born in August 1930, did have a work permit, even though he had not actually worked. When his card was rejected on the marketplace, he was sent with his grandmother and younger brother to the waiting train. He ran, hid, and then made his way to Tartak, where his mother arranged with Piatek for his entry into the camp. From Majauka, his father joined the family in Tartak after paying a large bribe. Michuluk worked a regular shift, carrying wood, products, from one machine to the next. 2 or 3 other younger children were said to have survived Tartak as well, living in a carefully constructed hideout inside a double wall. Jacob Kaufman, born in October 1931, had just turned 11 when the Wiersbennik ghetto was liquidated. A German engineer at the factory valued his father's work and thus provided the son with a work permit despite his young age. when his mother and 2 sisters were taken to the train, he and his brother and father entered the camp. At the factory, he was given a relatively easy physical job as a sweeper. While most young survivors remember the ordeal of the selections most vividly, Jacob remembered that his father, having incurred the dislike of an unnamed Jewish policeman, was switched to heavy shell production. Through ties to his own German supervisor, unnamed but circumstances indicate, once again, Bruno Pape, young Jacob was able to get his father reassigned. Since his father had left merchandise with Poles and was now in a position that allowed frequent contact with Polish workers, the family enjoyed an ample supply of food from the outside. Two young girls, 11-year-old Goldie Sacher, born in December 1931, and 9-year-old Tobsia Lustmann, born in August 1933, were successfully hidden with Polish families before the liquidation of the ghetto, and then smuggled into Mijałka many months later. Goldie stayed with a peasant woman in a village just 3 miles from her hometown of Bodzentyn. Over time, various people either recognized her or at least suspected her Jewish origins. On 2 occasions, she was sent elsewhere for weeks or months in hope that suspicions would diminish or be forgotten, but without success. Finally, in September 1943, her father decided it would be safer for Goldie to reunite with the family in Mijałka than to continue risking denunciation on the outside. He bribed a Jewish policeman to arrange for a morning overcount in a small, lightly guarded work party being sent to outside labor in the quarry near Mijałka. The peasant woman brought Goldie to the quarry, where she managed to mingle inconspicuously with the workers. Goldie then marched with them back through the camp gate, where the total in the work party now matched the number recorded. In Mijałka, she joined her mother and sister, Rachaela, working in the camp laundry. Even though she observed the inexorable deterioration in the health of her parents, the family remained intact throughout its internment in Strachowicz. Tobsia Lustmann was placed with a Polish family and posed as a visiting cousin. Though fair-haired and blue-eyed, her knowledge of Christianity was tested by suspicious neighbor children with whom she played, to the point that her aunt decided she must remain hidden inside. Kept in a closet or pantry whenever there were visitors, she had to relieve herself in the family sewage bucket without privacy, while others crudely commented on the size of her share. At night, she could hear members of the family whispering that they had to get rid of the Jew. After nearly 1 year of hiding, Tobsia, the increasingly frightened aunt, arranged to return Tobsia to her mother at a designated meeting place outside of camp. A Ukrainian guard had been bribed, and Tobsia was able to mingle with a column of returning workers and enter Mijałka. She remained in camp during the day while her mother and sister went to work. One Ukrainian guard who grew fond of the pretty blonde child brought her extra food. She was also befriended by the Jewish policeman Abram Wilczek. On the day of the Furlige selection, she ran to the building of the Jewish police in hope that her sister's friend, whom she described as a policeman from another town, thus presumably Shmuel Sizlui from Slidowek, would help her. This he did by placing her in an attic hiding place with other children. She was narrowly missed when a Ukrainian guard fired into the ceiling. There is one other example of a child about 7 or 8 years old being smuggled back into camp by his father from an endangered hiding place, in this case, even during the murderous Althoff period. Unfortunately, his parents did not survive. He was cared for by other prisoners and, incredibly, survived the camps even without his parents. Just recently, he has begun to contact other Strachowitza survivors to learn about his own past, about which he has little or no memory. Topsia Lustmann and Rosia Einesmann seemed to have been the youngest native Wiersbennikers to survive the Strachowitza camps and testify about it after the war. But 7 other children from elsewhere, some even younger, also survived to testify about their internment in Strachowitza. 2 were from families from Österreich who entered Strachowitza with their mothers when the Bodenschau camp was closed down in the spring of 1943. Ruth Moschkes, born 1934, had no specific memories of Strachowitza, but had vivid fragmentary memories of several harrowing episodes. In particular, her mother was among 180 people, including 2 children, transferred to Strachowitza to a new camp in Österreich. She remembers that, upon arrival, the commandant in Österreich did not want to accept the 2 children, and the driver refused to take them back with him. Ruth sat on the ground outside the gate while the 2 adults discussed whether she should be shot. Finally, the driver convinced the commandant that the children could be useful as messengers or kitchen help, and she was admitted. Jankiel Rosenberg, born in 1935, likewise entered Strachowitza with his mother when Bodenschau closed. His mother had a common friend with Jeremiah Wilczek, so she could speak with him. His father, in Warsaw, made arrangements to get his family out, but when the day came, Jankiel had come down with typhus and was too sick to travel. His mother departed while he remained in the care of Wilczek's wife. As a blonde, blue-eyed child, Jankiel also attracted the favor of a Ukrainian guard who gave him extra food. When he finally recovered from typhus, he was smuggled out to Warsaw. A number of children entered Mazałka from Wallenau in July 1943, including Rachel Wachsberg, born in December 1932, and Abraham Malek, born in May 1935. Rachel was part of a larger family from whom she got food, even though she and her younger brother did not work. She and her brother both tried to hide when the Ukrainian guards summoned everyone out of the barracks for the Fürlich selection. Her brother remained successfully hidden, but she was found and put on one of the trucks, as well as was her 45-year-old mother. However, Rachel was rescued by the policeman Turek. Abraham Wilczek found the suddenly motherless Rachel and her brother wandering around camp the following day and took them to join the children of the privileged Jews. Turek then arranged for her to have a factory job, cleaning pieces for bomb assembly, and he even paid a Polish foreman to watch over her and let her sleep when she had the night shift. Abraham Malek's father had made a small fortune in the leather goods business, which provided him with the means to help his family through bribery in the following years. When the family was transferred from Wallenau to Strachowitza in July 1943, Abraham's father must have made a substantial payment to someone, for they were taken into the quarters of the privileged Jews and slept together as a family. Unusual among children's testimonies, he made no mention of how he survived the Fürlich selection, which took so many children from the camp. As an 8-year-old, he did not work in the factory, but made himself productive. Something he learned that was very important in camp, through cleaning the family's barracks and carrying messages. Bronia Karafiol, born in April 1932, arrived in Strachowitza from the small or remnant ghetto in Radom. Though only 11 years old, she worked in the factory sorting and polishing bullets. She also remembered leaving camp to smuggle in food. Two even younger children, Rutger Greizenspan, born in June 1937, and Tola Grossman, born in September 1938, arrived in the transport of prisoners from Tamazau Mozaiki on September 5, 1943. Rutger was aware, when giving her testimony, that she could not clearly distinguish among what her own actual memories were, what she had learned from her parents, and what she read after the war. But she did have a distinct memory that her family was tipped off that the children were about to be taken, and that she was quickly thrown up into a hiding place in the ceiling. The guards shot into the ceiling, but she sensed that they had been bribed to miss. According to her mother's testimony, when the families learned that the children were to be taken away, the fathers constructed a hiding place inside a double roof. She, in fact, stayed with the children in the hiding place to keep them quiet. Neither mother nor daughter said so explicitly, but it can be inferred that they too were living in the family quarters where Tobsia Lustmann was hidden by the Jewish policeman. Tola Grossman entered Strakavica with her parents, and they also lived together in one corner of the family barracks. Her parents left each day for work, but she and other children in the barracks were cared for by a pregnant woman. They moved about in gangs and played violent games such as You're a Jew, I'm a Nazi. Her mother did not attempt to shield or protect her from the danger of the situation. Instead, she went out of her way to tell Tola what the parents knew, including the rumors of Auschwitz and gassing. One day, her father barged into the room and warned, "Hide her." She and her mother were both shoved into the hiding place in the double ceiling, and her father covered it up behind them. Through the cracks, she could see children with whom she had played being placed on the trucks. She called this event the children's selection, and said that thereafter all her friends were gone. She was never again allowed to go outside the barracks and play, or even to stand by the window. It is clear that some Germans had taken bribes permitting the admission of the children of privileged Jews into the camps at the very beginning. Others came into camp in 1943 with full knowledge of the German authorities. The lists of the transfers from Radom and Tamazau Mazowiecki, found after the war and reprinted in the Wiersbennick Community Book, list entering children separately, and the list for Wallenau also openly includes the post-1930 birth years of a number of transferred prisoners. The known and tolerated presence of some children obviously facilitated the presence of illegal children as well, making them less conspicuous. The Fearlish selection aimed specifically at older women and children, but it had been dictated by SS officials in Radom, not local Germans who had accepted bribes to overlook the children in camp. After the war, Kurt Otto Baumgarten claimed not only that he had permitted children in camp, but also that he had provided warnings when they had to be hidden, that is, when he could not protect them, such as during the Fearlish selection. The testimony of some survivors corroborates that the parents living with the children had been tipped off, knew a children's selection was imminent, and thus prepared a hiding place ahead of time in a double ceiling in the family barracks. At least some of the non-privileged Jews living in regular barracks also had heard that such a selection was imminent, and they took what measures they could to increase their chances for survival. Among these, at least several were rescued by the Jewish police. Kolditz's killings of the Jewish policeman Chaim Kogut during the Fearlish selection, when someone was found hiding in a barracks for which he was responsible, thus once again fits into the wider picture of a mutually beneficial alliance between Baumgarten and the camp council and camp police. Kolditz was trying to exploit this selection order from Radom to shatter that alliance and take control of the Mazauka camp. The parents and children who survived had reason to be grateful, especially those who were rescued through help from the Jewish policemen. For those who lost family members, however, the Firlige selection was a great source of resentment and bitterness. One young man who had grown up on the same street in Wiersbennik as the Wilczeks and played with their two sons lost his younger sister during the Firlige selection. Why had the police not protected his sister, a neighbor since childhood, when the children of some newcomers, strangers, and outsiders had been protected and survived but could have been sent in his sister's place, he asked. Some of those who lost family in the Firlige selection alongside unpropertied. This is so bizarre when they have this hyphen in the middle of like a three-part word. Sorry, I'm going to cut that out. Alongside unpropertied newcomers who felt very disadvantaged and discriminated against, remained among the staunchest critics of the Wilczek regime. And that concludes chapter 19.